Hello and welcome. You're watching Coronavirus Facts versus Myths. I'm Gargi Rawat. Today we're going to focus on treatments for coronavirus. While there is no clear treatment, there's no sure-shot medication, there are many tried and tested and discarded treatments as well. Drug firm Glenmark Pharmaceuticals said that its findings on the antiviral drug Favipiravir showed that no new safety signals or concerns in mild to moderate COVID patients. The post-marketing survey study was initiated in July 2020 to evaluate the safety and efficacy of the drug in mild to moderate patients after it had received emergency use authorization. Now, the drug maker says the study found that the antiviral drug was safe and effective for COVID patients. Well, to talk more about this and to understand, what does this study actually mean, we're joined by Dr. Yatin Mehta, Chairman, Medanta Institute of Critical Care. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us, and explain to us, what this study means, that this particular drug helps in patients who have moderate to mild disease.
See, Gargi, what so far the government approved was therapy, antiviral therapy, was only remdesivir, which is given by injection, and remdesivir was only approved for patients who are hospitalized and on oxygen. So that means obviously more severe disease. While Favipiravir, DCGI had approved it as an experimental, emergency use for patients who are mild to moderate. That means patients are not necessarily on oxygen, and this can be, since it's an oral tablet, it can safely be given at home. So patients who are not admitted, and as you saw in the last surge of COVID, the second wave, we were totally swamped by people requiring oxygen and people requiring hospitalizations. We were running short of beds, we were running short of oxygen. Now, Favipiravir, this study was a large number of patients, more than 1,000 patients in large number of centers, 6 government centers and 7 private hospitals from different parts of India. And they found that there was significant shortening of hospitalization, and hardly out of 1,000 patients, only 1 patient needed to put on a ventilator. So that means basically only 1.4% patients required more advanced oxygen therapy. So the disease did not progress in most of the patients. It was safe. The side effects were mostly very minor. Only 1 patient, I think they had to stop the therapy. Only 3 patients, they had to modify the dosages. So otherwise, out of 1,000 patients, most of them tolerated it quite well. And these are oral tablets. So I think it makes sense to use it. Although ICMR had not mentioned it in their recommendations in the last one. But if you look at it, ICMR had recommended so many medicines earlier which were also now discarded. So I think we should have an open mind. And if something can prevent hospitalization and oxygen therapy and worsening of the disease, then I think we should use it.
Right, Doctor, and if we talk about, some of the medications or treatments that we've been through in this last year and a half or 2 years, we've had plasma therapy that's now, been put aside, hydroxychloroquine, even questions over remdesivir with WHO not supporting it. So if you could just, tell us a bit about all these various therapies and medications.
See, the whole story began in India in March when we got these Italian patients at Medanta. At that time, nothing was known about the therapy. So the only antiviral that time which was being used was lopinavir-retinavir combination, which we did use in those patients. But then again, it was not substantiated. So, I mean, the evidence was very limited at that point of time. And then last 1.5 years, we have seen several large studies, multi-center studies, published studies, validated studies. So it changes. See, medicine is a very dynamic science. The disease was only invented 1.5 years back. So the knowledge also progressed over a period of time. And so then came hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, which we have been using for malaria earlier in India particularly. And that also, people used it for a long time. And then that was also not substantiated. So WHO did not recommend it. The side effects were quite a few. And that was also discarded. Then you have azithromycin and doxycycline. These are the antibiotics which we use commonly in India for community-acquired pneumonias, but which were also found to have some degree of antiviral, anti-inflammatory effects. But again, they have not been proven. So I think that at the moment, the therapies, most of the therapy, plasma therapy came with so much of noise, and I was never convinced about plasma therapy. I used to give it only when the patient's family insisted, and I used to tell them, The evidence is very limited.
Right, there was a lot of energy that was spent, I have to say, on plasma therapy. And I know even here at NDTV, we did talk a lot about it when we asked people to come forward, and provided the Delhi government itself had put up, a plasma therapy bank in a sense. We're also joined by Dr. Sanjit Sasidharan, Head Critical Care, SL Raheja Hospital, Mahim. Doctor, we were discussing this new study that has been released by Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, saying that Favipiravir has been found to be effective in somewhat moderate to mild patients who are suffering from moderate to mild coronavirus. What is your view on this? And Dr. Yatin Mehta and I were also discussing, various therapies that over the last 2 years we've seen that have come, a lot of hype and then been discarded.
Yeah, so Favipiravir is something that we used quite a bit at the start of the epidemic. It was more like a go-get drug because at that moment we didn't have any other options. We don't have very good options. However, there have been quite a number of data that's coming out in the last couple of months on Favipiravir, and we are not very certain clearly about the fact whether it really works. It doesn't cause huge amount of side effects, but that doesn't mean it really works. And to actually call it a great study, this is not a very great study because it's mostly a post-marketing surveillance that has come in, and large randomized controlled trials are really the grade 1 evidence in which we will use it, and it's very difficult to do these randomized controlled trials. So if it doesn't cause any help, will it cause any benefits? That's the question, and time will tell. We are not very certain about this one particular study actually exemplifying the difference between efficacy, effectiveness and safety.
All right, so we need more studies, and we have seen that England especially has been conducting a lot of studies on the various drugs over the year and a half. All of them come out with various papers, and again I'd like to tell our viewers that this particular study, the findings are by the Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. It's a study called, as we said, post-marketing survey by the company. But Dr. Yatin Mehta, are you hopeful of any treatment coming soon for COVID? There's talk now how it will become endemic in 6 months' time, how we need a combination of, discipline, vaccines, and hopefully drugs in the future to manage this disease.
Fortunately, Gargi, the clarity is more now. After 1.5 years of fighting the disease and science coming out with newer advancements, a lot of unnecessary things which we were doing have been discarded. So you're not wasting your energy and time. At the moment, the therapies are very limited, which have been shown scientifically to be of benefit. So remdesivir has been shown. It does not reduce necessarily mortality, that means the death rate, but it does reduce the hospitalization and progression of the disease. And then you have steroids, which have used in patients who are hospitalized again. And you have blood thinners, which should be used in patients again who are hospitalized. So these therapies are now established, but most of the other drugs have not been really proven, and they have not stood the test of time, as is said. Favipiravir has limited use. I have been using it quite a lot in non-hospitalized mild to moderate disease, because everyone is not going to come to the hospital to get a remdesivir. And it does make sense because it has been shown that lesser the viral load, quicker the recovery of the patient, and lesser the severity of the disease. So it does make sense to use an antiviral which has been shown to reduce the viral load. But as Sanjit rightly pointed it out, that we need more randomized control trial to be able to show it to benefit beyond any doubt. But at the moment, the way it stands, I think it can be used in mild to moderate.
Right. Dr. Sasidharan, is there any treatment that you feel is promising? There's monoclonal antibodies. It's very expensive right now. And there's also this hype about Ivermectin that just doesn't seem to die down.
Yeah, so Ivermectin is one drug that's been there for a colossal amount of time in the treatment, and it's been used colossally all over the world, frankly, Ivermectin. There doesn't seem to be a biological plausibility to use Ivermectin in the doses that it is administered, because it requires very humongous doses in order to get the levels that would actually kill the virus or prevent the virus from getting into the systems. There have been studies that have come in, but they're all small studies and not well controlled in that matter. Analysis have come in, systematic meta reviews and meta-analysis have come in, but none of the included studies have been real good randomized controlled trials that have actually proven this. And that's probably the reason that major giants like WHO, CDC, as well as the ICMR has not put Ivermectin into use. It's been used. There is no there is no side effect of that, and definitely some parts of our country also has actually resorted to, that is Goa has resorted to actually use Ivermectin to many of their patients. And if you actually look for the magic bullet, yes, this is something that's something in the making, as Dr. Yatin really clearly mentioned, that steroid, anticoagulation and remdesivir are the only go-get drugs for the moment. However, there is some activity going on in linoleic acid and nitric oxide, which probably will see the future of the day, and they're very exciting. That will probably help us to prevent mortality and improve survival.
Right, Dr. Mehta, your short comments on what treatments you see as hopeful, and also this hoopla about Ivermectin, especially in the US, it's become very political and controversial.
See, Ivermectin in India also was grossly overused without adequate evidence. There was only lab evidence that it may have some antiviral effect, and certain state governments put it on this thing. So I think medical decisions, in my opinion, should be left to the medical specialists and not to the politicians to publicize or to claim that they have invented it, like what plasma therapy happened. I mean, it was really a lot of resources were wasted on plasma therapy. They bought machines for plasmapheresis and all that. So I think science should be left to scientists, and politics should be left to politicians, in my opinion.
All right. Well, we'll wait, for your words on any sort of new promising treatments. Well, now let's shift to the next topic of discussion on the show today, and that's about vaccines. A look at immunity and vaccines now. And this at a time when there's a big debate raging over immunity waning and vaccine booster shots being needed. Some countries are already giving booster shots. Others are considering it. The WHO has said that the aim should be to vaccinate as many people, and have asked countries not to give booster shots just now. But now a study of 614 fully vaccinated health workers in India has found that there is a significant drop in their COVID fighting antibodies within 4 months of the first shot. The findings could help the government decide on this issue of booster shots, but those heading the study have also said that waning antibodies do not necessarily mean that immunized people lose their ability to counter the disease, as the body's memory cells may still kick in to offer substantial protection. Well, let's return to the doctors to talk about this. And Dr. Sasidharan, first to you, your view, firstly on this study that has emerged about antibodies waning in 4 months.
So this is really something that we must be very careful about, because the antibodies that are studied are not the defining point of immunity. There are memory cells and other cells that kick into fighting and warding off this particular illness. So that study should not be thought about as the fact that after 6 months or 7 months my immunity is going down, because this will make people test their antibodies and then decide whether they should be going out, or take antibodies and then decide whether they should be getting a vaccine or another drug. So with respect to that, this study should not be taken as a defining point to decide about booster doses, but we do know that when the antibody levels that we are actually testing outside are actually waning down, there may be a slight drop in the immunity, but this doesn't mean you decide on the booster. But yes, it gives us a thinking that yes, we may require another booster in a short span of time, because our immunity may be coming on the lower side.
Right. Dr. Mehta, though right now in India, the focus is on vaccinating as many people. We're nowhere near vaccinating a majority of the adults yet. And there's this target that the government has of, over 60% being vaccinated by the end of the year. So that currently is the focus, isn't it?
See, Gargi, in very simplistic terms, if somebody is starving, you feed that person first, or you feed somebody who's malnourished? You obviously feed somebody who's starving. So I think we need to first vaccinate the whole population. There are not enough resources to give a booster dose to serve people. I think first let's vaccinate 2 shots to everybody, and then the high risk group we can start thinking about giving the booster shot. So I think that luxury, and that is the reason WHO has also not recommended it, because that not enough first shots have been given. So let us vaccinate the whole population, and then we come to the booster shot. I'll be the first one to take one if required.
Right, but Dr. Mehta, but it's still, this is a question we get asked very often, especially with people who received the vaccine, at the start of the year. It's been over 6 months, and all this talk of antibodies waning obviously leads to a lot of anxiety. As Dr. Sasidharan said, that a lot of people have now taken to actually testing their antibodies levels and trying to, discern the kind of protection they have from that.
See, Gargi, the problem is that because of the COVID, half of Indian population have become honorary doctors. They do their antibody test when it is not indicated. They decide whether the antibody is sufficient or not and they should require a booster or not. I think we should leave it to the experts. At the moment, there is really not enough evidence that at what level of antibodies is sufficient or not, and what type of antibodies they are measuring. They are measuring not necessarily neutralizing antibodies or spike antibodies. I mean, so we really don't know. It is still uncharted territory. Let's leave it to the experts, and let's not go by. And as Sanjit rightly pointed it out, the immunity is two types of immunity. Is by the B cells and it is by the T cells. It is a cellular immunity which can also play a very significant role in fighting against the second-time infection. So I think leave it to the experts. At the moment, let's not get too excited about the booster shot. Just let the whole of India who's eligible take the 2 shots of vaccine.
Right, Dr. Sasidharan, now we know this is a big issue, right? Currently in the US, they're going to make a final decision on it, especially after, Pfizer and Moderna have both talked about antibodies waning, and they claim that they at least are going to use it perhaps for the people who are more immunocompromised, and perhaps that is something that India can also look at maybe next year.
Yeah, so as Dr. Mehta said it, it's important that we realize that we are not a country and that has that kind of provision to start giving the boosters in the first place. And you rightly put it on the fact that yes, those patients who probably are at the front line, maybe the healthcare workers and probably the elderly people who are immunocompromised, may be the population who may warrant the booster, but we are not in that zone as of now. We are at the zone where we should probably vaccinate 2 shots to almost everyone in the country in order to achieve the herd immunity that we are all wanting to get, and that's about it.
Right, Dr. Mehta, now it's also being said that in 6 months that coronavirus will become endemic and we'll be able to better manage it, and hopefully we will have that level of protection of a majority of the population. Your views on that?
Yeah, I agree with that opinion because I think, almost 60% of the population have got at least 1 shot, and the way we are vaccinating almost 1 crore a day, I think we should be hit a reasonable number by December end. And the rest of the 20% or maybe may have already been exposed to the viral infection. So I think we will have at least 70% of herd immunity, 70% antibodies in the common population, and we would have achieved herd immunity. So COVID is here to stay. Let us be very clear about it. It is going to reduce in intensity and contagiousness, and we have to learn to live with it, with all the protective measures which we should continue to do. But it is not going to be next year as bad as what it has been in the past. Like swine flu came, it was absolutely created havoc for a very short period of time and panic. But now swine flu comes, nobody gets excited in my hospital. We isolate those patients and we take care of them. But so that's how we have to learn to live with it.
Right, Dr. Sasidharan, your view, and also what would this mean if we think of another variant of COVID emerging? You already have this new variant that's being talked about, though many are saying Delta is still stronger than the new variant. But should a new variant emerge, or is even that fear now lessened by the vaccinations and hopefully a lot of people having already had antibodies from infection?
Yeah, so all said and done, we know that the new variant that came out was markedly less virulent as compared to the earlier variant, and I think probably that's related to the fact that we've been kind of herd immunized to a certain extent, and we are getting better at it. So the virus per se is not getting a proper host in which it can probably mutate, is what I feel, to a more virulent variant, and we are achieving a level where this particular virus is going to live with us and we will take precautions during all this time. It's just like how Dr. Yatin Mehta put it very clearly, that this is going to be like swine flu. It will come, it will go, and we will take care of it. We will isolate and we will keep taking our precautions to prevent the spread of this particular disease.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dr. Mehta and Dr. Sasidharan, for joining us on the program today. Well, with that, time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, we take a look at steps taken in Germany to promote vaccination. Stay with us. And now our focus on Germany. Germany's vaccination numbers are good, but for health officials, not good enough. That's why the country has kicked off a vaccine action week this week. It hopes to encourage more people to get the shot. To hear more about what's in store to entice the unvaccinated, let's go across to William Glucroft, a correspondent with DW in Berlin. And William, what exactly is this vaccination action week all about?
Yeah, it's a big week here in Germany. It's the first coordinated nationwide action week, different kinds of offers and campaigns going on all around the country to try to encourage the still unvaccinated people, like as you noted, about 40% unvaccinated people who still to go get their shots. This comes, Germany, like many European countries, the United States as well, hitting that wall, starting to plateau as they run out of people who are really interested and eager to get their shots and having to work more and more to convince people to go get their shots for whatever reason, whether it's fear or skepticism or just not having enough time or can't be bothered to do it, or young people who think that they are not really affected by it and don't really need it. So you're seeing this week the government partnering with stores, with businesses, with companies, with event locations, with public venues. One, to increase the number of places where you can get a vaccine. So just on your everyday business, you can just pop in someplace and get a shot. Some places are even offering deals, like you can get into the zoo, or you can get a free, alcohol-free, mind you, alcohol-free beer in exchange for getting your shot. Or probably the most fun one here in Berlin is one doner kebab stand is offering a gift voucher for a doner kebab sandwich, Berlin's famous fast food. So those are some of the things that are going on to try to encourage the unvaccinated to finally get their shots.
All right, so lots of goodies being offered to entice people to get vaccinated. Has there been any sort of criticism of this campaign?
Absolutely. Of course, you always have people on the far right. You have vaccine skeptics, science skeptics who just don't want to have to, anything to do with these rules or vaccines at all. But then you also have opposition politicians who are saying this action week is a nice gesture, but it's just not enough, that it should have been happening in this way and form for a long time, and it should continue going on like this. There should be ample opportunities for people to regularly go in and get their shot, whether it's at a store or your local market or wherever it may be. Angela Merkel's chief of staff actually came out and said these kinds of things will continue. But again, opposition politicians saying it's just too little, too late, and there needs to be more information and more of a push to get good information out to people so people feel comfortable to get their shots, and especially going into the winter months where there's a lot of fear that those numbers, as you noted at the top, are just not high enough to get us through the winter.
All right, thank you so much, William, for joining us on the program. And finally, a COVID patient was discharged from a Uttar Pradesh hospital after 130 days of fighting the disease. Vishwas Saini was released after over a 4-month hospital stay. And speaking to the media, he said in all these months he stayed away from his family. The doctors kept him motivated to successfully fight COVID while he kept seeing people dying all around him at the Meerut hospital. And as you can see from those visuals, after he was discharged, he has visible scar marks on his face, possibly caused by the oxygen masks and other treatment equipment. But incredible, after 130 days, a Meerut man has recovered from COVID.